taunts echoed as Noah neared the rich kid's piano, their sneers biting like ice. "Don't touch what ain't yours." The room pulsed with cruel laughter, daring him to fail. But when his trembling fingers struck the keys, a raw, defiant melody surged, and every mocking voice froze in stunned silence. Noah Carter didn't talk much, not because he was shy. He just didn't see the point in filling the air when no one seemed to listen anyway. He lived on the east side of Mobile near Dauphin Street in a cramped two-bedroom apartment where the walls were thin and the neighbors louder than they needed to be. His mom, Vanessa, worked double shifts at a local clinic, and his older brother, Marcus, spent most of his time with a crowd Noah didn't trust. In their cluttered living room, a broken guitar, his late father's, its strings snapped and body scratched, leaned against the wall, a silent reminder of the music that once filled their home. Noah would stare at it sometimes, imagining the songs his dad played before he was gone. He could still hear his father's voice, low and warm, teaching him a simple melody on that guitar when he was 6. "This is yours, Noah. Hold it tight." That tune lived in his head, the root of every song he played. But Noah, he had music, not a fancy piano or some state-of-the-art setup, just an old beat-up keyboard at the rec center down the street. Half the keys didn't work, and the chord sparked if you moved it the wrong way, but to Noah, it was enough. One evening, as Noah slipped out to the rec center, Marcus blocked the doorway, his voice sharp. "You're wasting your time with that junk keyboard, Noah. Ain't nobody gonna care what you play." Noah's jaw tightened, but he met his brother's gaze. "Maybe not, but I ain't playing for them," Marcus scoffed, stepping aside. "Keep dreaming, kid." The words stung, but they lit a fire in Noah's chest, pushing him to prove his brother wrong. Outside, a neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, overheard and sneered. "Boy, that racket you call music keeps us up. Get a real job like your mama." Noah's fists clenched, but he swallowed his anger, muttering, "It ain't racket, it's mine." Every afternoon after school, he'd rush over, fingers itching to play. No sheet music, no lessons, just sounds he carried in his head and heart. He played what he felt. Sometimes joy, sometimes anger, sometimes silence. No one had taught him, but some things don't need teaching. They just come. At school, Noah kept his head down. He wasn't a troublemaker, but he wasn't a standout either. Teachers often missed the way he tapped rhythms with his pencil during math, or the way his eyes lit up when the morning announcements played the school anthem. Most of the kids didn't notice him, except when they wanted to borrow answers or pick someone easy to tease. During a group presentation in English class, Noah's partner mocked his quiet suggestion to include a song lyric, laughing loudly. "What, you think you're some musician now?" The class snickered, and Noah's face burned as he sank lower in his seat, the humiliation a heavy weight. Later, a rival classmate, Jamal, slipped a fake note under Noah's desk, claiming the music room was off-limits to nobodies. Noah almost believed it until Miss Laurent caught Jamal smirking and tore the note up, her voice firm. "Don't let fools dim your light, Noah." His one real escape came from Miss Laurent, his music teacher at Frederick Douglass Middle. She was the only adult who seemed to see him for more than his quiet. She'd catch him humming during lunch, pull him aside after class, and ask him questions that made him think about chords, scales, how to tell a story with your hands instead of your mouth. One day, as Noah lingered after class, Miss Laurent shared a rare piece of her past. "I grew up like you, Noah," she said softly, her eyes distant. "Folks told me music was a fool's dream, that I'd never make it out of my neighborhood. But I played anyway, 'cause it was mine." She paused, her gaze piercing. "You're stronger than their doubts. Promise me you'll keep playing." Noah nodded, a lump in his throat. "You hear the world different than most people, Noah. Don't ever let that go." He nodded, her words sinking deep, a lifeline in a world that often felt against him. He didn't plan to let it go. Then, one Tuesday morning just before winter break, the school announced a joint event with Crestview Academy, an elite private school across town. It was billed as a community arts exchange, which meant Noah's class would spend a day attending workshops and watching student performances at the other school. Most kids groaned. Noah sat up straight. Crestview Academy, he'd heard of it. Big lawns, uniforms, a cafeteria that served sushi. Rumor was Their music department had a baby grand in every room. Noah couldn't picture that. He'd never touched a real piano before. He'd seen one once, though, at the City Center Concert Hall when his class got free tickets to the Philharmonic. It gleamed under the stage lights like something out of a dream. He didn't hear most of that concert. He was too busy watching the pianist's hands. Now he had a chance to see it for himself, maybe even play one if no one was looking. Beneza ironed his best shirt the night before the trip, even though it had a small stain near the cuff. "You behave," she said, not looking up from the ironing board. "Don't go embarrassing me in front of those people." "I won't. Don't touch nothing you're not supposed to." He nodded. He meant it too. But music had a way of making him forget rules. But Noah had no idea how much one mistake or maybe one moment of courage was about to change everything. The bus ride to Crestview Academy was only 30 minutes, but it felt like Noah had stepped into another planet. As the bus pulled through the iron gates, he stared out the window at rows of perfectly trimmed hedges, fountains that actually worked, and buildings that looked more like museums than classrooms. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and wealth, overwhelming Noah's senses. Too bright, too polished, too perfect. Kids in matching navy blazers stood in groups, laughing the way people do when they don't have to think about what might happen tomorrow. Everything seemed too clean, too still. Even the sidewalks felt expensive. Noah followed his classmates off the bus, gripping the strap of his backpack. He didn't say much, just took in the sight of a courtyard with a bronze statue in the center, some founder with a scroll in one hand and a smug grin carved into his face. Inside, the floors shone like glass. The hallways smelled like lemon polish and fresh paper. No graffiti, no cracked tiles, no teachers yelling from down the hall, just quiet confidence. He walked with the group past displays of student art, framed like it belonged in a gallery. One piece had an actual price tag, $200. Noah stared. He could draw too, but no one had ever offered to buy his sketches. As they entered the auditorium, a Crestview student with a microphone singled out Noah's group, smirking. "Welcome, dinkish kids. Don't touch anything you can't afford, okay?" Laughter erupted, and Noah's cheeks burned as eyes turned to him, the stain on his shirt suddenly glaring. They were herded into an auditorium where the Crestview students were already seated in neat rows. An older man with silver hair welcomed them with the same voice people use at church. He said a few things about unity and creative expression, and called the event a celebration of talent from all backgrounds. Noah looked around and counted. Out of everyone in the room, he was one of maybe 5 black students. Most of the Crestview kids looked like they'd never missed a meal, never been told not today, never had to wait until Friday for new socks. They watched a short performance by the Crestview Jazz Ensemble. It was good, clean, practiced, even impressive, but something about it felt rehearsed in a way that made Noah's chest tighten. Not because he wasn't good enough, because he knew he was, but no one here would believe that unless he proved it. They split into breakout sessions. Noah was assigned to a songwriting workshop in room 208. He walked there with a group of kids he didn't know, staying quiet while others made jokes about cafeteria food and whose Tesla their parents drove. At the workshop entrance, Noah found a crumpled note slipped into his backpack. "Stay away from our piano, loser." His heart sank, but he tore it up, whispering to himself, "They don't own me." Room 208 was a music room, all right, but not like the one back home. This one had floor-to-ceiling windows, soundproof walls, and instruments lined up like soldiers. Guitars, violins, a cello in the corner. But what caught Noah's eye was the piano. A gleaming black Steinway Grand, bigger than any instrument he'd ever touched. The lid was open, the keys polished like bone. The instructor hadn't arrived yet, and most of the kids took seats without much interest. Noah didn't. He stood by the wall, eyes locked on the piano like it was daring him. Then he heard a voice behind him. "Don't even think about it." He turned. A tall boy with slicked back blonde hair was staring at him, flanked by 2 others who looked like they practiced scowling in the mirror. The tall one was wearing a monogram blazer, LLP stitched on the chest. "That's my dad's donation," the boy added. "You got anything like that in your neighborhood?" Noah blinked, unsure if the kid was being serious or just trying to get a reaction. "I wasn't going to break it." "You sure about that?" The boy, Landon, smirked. "Careful, those keys aren't made for dirty fingers." A few kids nearby snickered, and one started a low chant. "No touch, no touch." The taunt spread, a cruel rhythm that echoed in Noah's ears. One of Landon's friends stepped closer, shoving Noah's shoulder lightly but enough to make him stumble. "Back off, charity case," he hissed. Landon leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "Touch it, and you'll regret it, East Side." A Crestview girl, Emma, joined in, her voice dripping with scorn. "Why are you even here? Go play your little toy keyboard." Noah's eyes blazed, and he stepped forward, voice low but firm. "I'll play what I want. Watch me." Emma's smirk faltered, caught off guard by his defiance. The words hit like a slap. The room got quieter. A few other students turned to watch. Noah felt heat rise to his ears, but he didn't move. His hands stayed at his sides. The piano seemed farther away now, like it had shifted into another dimension. Part of him wanted to walk out, another part wanted to speak, but he didn't trust his voice to come out steady. But then he remembered his father's melody, the one he'd clung to through every doubt, and something fierce sparked inside him. "They think I'm nothing," Noah thought, his heart pounding. "But I'll show them. This piano ain't theirs. It's mine today." But then someone behind him laughed, and that was all it took for something inside Noah to change. Noah didn't remember making the decision. One second he was standing still, cheeks hot and heart pounding, and the next he was walking toward the piano. The smirk on Landon's face cracked just slightly. His buddies exchanged a look like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Noah didn't flinch. He pulled the bench out with both hands and sat down slowly, like he had all the time in the world. His palms were damp, his throat dry, but his fingers didn't shake. The room was still, not silent, but still, like a breath held too long. The instructor hadn't come in yet. Maybe that was a blessing. Maybe it was fate. Noah raised his hands above the keys, then he hesitated, because this wasn't the busted keyboard from the rec center. This was real. This was weight. This was sound that carried and echoed and filled a room, not because of volume, but because of presence. He could feel every eye on his back. He could hear Landon's voice echoing inside his head, dirty fingers like his skin had somehow stained the air. What if I mess this up, he thought, panic clawing at his chest. What if they're right and I don't belong here? But then he remembered his father's guitar, its broken strings still singing in his memory, and he pushed the fear down. He closed his eyes, hearing his father's melody, the one that had carried him through every hurt, and let it guide his hands. He took one more breath and pressed the first key. A simple C, soft, clean, it rang out like it had been waiting for him. Then came an E, then G. He built the chord the way he always did, by feel. No one told him how, and no one had to. Music was the only thing that ever made sense without needing to be explained. He let his left hand follow, walking bass notes, gentle at first, then stronger. Then the right hand returned, weaving a melody over the rhythm. Something familiar but unfinished. It was the tune he always played to himself when he was alone, the one he'd never named because it felt too personal, a song that didn't need words to say what he couldn't. The room began to shift. Conversation stopped. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. The two boys who stood behind Lannon no longer looked amused. They looked confused. Lannon didn't speak, but his mouth tightened. And Noah, he didn't even notice anymore. He wasn't playing for them. He was playing for the nights he spent alone in his room, listening to the sounds of his city outside his window. He was playing for the Sundays when his mother swayed to gospel at church, eyes closed, face soft for once. He was playing for the version of himself that had never been told, "Don't touch that." The music swelled. His hands flew faster now, confident and sharp. It wasn't perfect. He missed a note, stumbled on a chord, but it didn't matter. It was raw, alive, the kind of playing that didn't ask permission. When he stopped, the room didn't react right away. There was a pause, the kind that usually follows a punch in the gut. Then a girl near the back let out a soft, "Ooh." Another student clapped. A few others joined. Landon didn't move. His hands were clenched at his sides. "That wasn't bad," one of his friends muttered. But Noah heard something else in his voice. It was respect. The door creaked open. The instructor finally walked in holding a clipboard. She paused mid-step, looking from Noah to the stunned class. "Did I miss something?" she asked. A kid near the front nodded slowly. "Yeah, you did." Noah stood up slowly, pushing the bench back into place. As he turned to leave, Landon stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "You think that proves something? One song doesn't make you one of us." Noah met his gaze, unflinching. "I ain't trying to be you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm just me." Landon's eyes narrowed, but he stepped back, silenced by Noah's calm defiance. A classmate from Noah's school, Kayshawn, whispered to another, "He shouldn't have done that. They'll make him pay." The betrayal stung, but Noah kept walking, head high. Noah didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. For once, the silence wasn't awkward. It was earned. But just as Noah thought it was over, he turned and found something waiting for him in the hallway that he hadn't expected at all. Noah stepped into the hallway, his chest still tight from the adrenaline, unsure whether to feel proud or afraid. He hadn't planned to play. He hadn't even known if he could, but he did, and now everything felt different. That's when he saw them. A small crowd had gathered outside the music room. Students from other workshops, a few teachers, all drawn by the sound. Some looked curious, others surprised, a few even impressed. But the one face Noah locked onto immediately was Miss Laurent. She stood near the back, her hand covering her mouth, not in shock, but in something else. Something softer. Her eyes shone in a way that made Noah look down for a second. She walked toward him slowly. "You really played that?" she asked gently. He nodded. "That was yours, that music." He nodded again, almost afraid to say it out loud. She looked past him into the room, then back at him. "Noah, that wasn't just good. That was something people remember." He didn't know what to say. He hadn't thought about being remembered. He just wanted to touch the keys, hear what they sounded like when played without fear. Another teacher approached, someone he didn't recognize, a tall woman in a gray blazer, clipboard tucked under her arm. She bent slightly to meet him at eye level. "I'm Mrs. Hargrove," she said. "I run the advanced music program here. I heard you from down the hall." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't seem to mind. "Have you ever taken lessons?" He shook his head. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "Just practicing," he said. "I play at the rec center sometimes, and at home when my brother lets me use his headphones." She smiled. "Well, you've got something special. That kind of ear, that kind of expression, you don't teach that, you guide it, you nurture it." Mrs. Hargrove's smile faded slightly as she glanced at Landon in the room. "Some here won't like this, Noah. Talent like yours, it threatens them. Stay sharp." Noah's stomach twisted, but he nodded, her warning echoing Kayshawn's words. Behind her, Landon finally emerged from the classroom, his blazer crumpled from leaning against the wall too long. He scanned the crowd, then focused on Noah. Their eyes met, but neither said a word. One of Landon's friends whispered something and laughed, but Landon didn't respond. His face was hard to read now, not angry, not smug, just unsure. Miss Lawrence stepped in. "Noah, how would you feel about playing something at the final performance this afternoon?" He looked up sharply. "Me?" "Yes. They always leave space for one guest student to share something at the closing. I know you should do it." He looked at the floor, then at Mrs. Hargrove, then back to Miss Laurent. A wave of nerves hit him like a second punch. Performing once in a classroom was one thing. Playing in front of the whole auditorium? "I don't know," he muttered. "You don't have to," Miss Laurent said gently. "But I think you'll regret it if you don't." He knew she was right. He nodded slowly. "Okay." The teachers began to scatter, the hallway clearing, the moment folding back into the day. Noah followed Miss Laurent as she led him toward the performance hall, his steps slow, the hallway impossibly long. But something inside him was different now. It wasn't confidence, not exactly. It was closer to certainty, like when a song plays and you already know where the notes go, even if you've never heard it before. As he passed a classroom, he overheard a teacher's hushed voice. "He's talented, sure, but a kid like that? He's not ready for this stage." The words cut deep, reigniting Noah's doubts, but he clenched his fists and kept walking, determined to prove them wrong. As he approached the stage, he noticed the piano bench wobble slightly. A screw loosened. Someone's petty sabotage. His heart raced, but he steadied it himself, refusing to let their tricks stop him. Landon stayed behind, alone, near the doorway. "Noah," he said quietly. Noah turned. Landon looked like he wanted to say something, maybe to take back what he said earlier, maybe to act like none of it happened. But instead, he just gave the smallest shrug and turned away. But as Noah entered the auditorium later that day, he had no idea who else would be watching from the shadows, and how deeply his performance would echo beyond that room. The auditorium was brighter than Noah remembered. He stood behind the curtain, heart pounding, staring at the polished stage floor. His breath caught, chest tightening as the crowd's murmurs grew louder, threatening a panic attack. "You're enough," he whispered, clutching his father's melody in his mind to ground himself. Rows of chairs stretched out beyond the stage, already half-filled. Students shuffled in with snacks and programs, joking and scrolling on their phones. A few teachers stood near the back, chatting in low voices. Everything looked casual, except to Noah. He was wearing the same wrinkled shirt from that morning, sweat beginning to darken the collar. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear of playing. He trusted his hands. It was the crowd, the unfamiliar eyes, the weight of being seen. Ms. Laurent appeared beside him, her voice low. "They're going to love you." "What if I mess up?" he asked. "You won't, and even if you do, they'll still feel it." That helped a little. The student announcer, a tall girl with thick glasses and a polished voice, introduced the event's closing performance. "We'd like to welcome a guest student from Frederick Douglass Middle School, Noah Carter," with an original polite applause. Noah stepped out. He didn't look at the crowd, just focused on the piano waiting at center stage. It gleamed under the lights, same as before, like it knew him now. He sat, took one breath, let his fingers find their home, and he played. It wasn't the same melody as earlier. This one was slower, quieter, more patient, like a letter written out loud. It started with the kind of ache you can't name, something in the pauses between notes, the way certain chords hung longer than they should. Halfway through, a Crestview student shouted, "Go back to the rec center!" The jeer pierced the silence, and Noah's fingers faltered for a split second. Verticrit his grit, channeling the pain into his music, letting the notes roar back, fiercer, drowning out the hate. Then it shifted, grew warmer, braver, like something fighting to stand on its own feet. Every measure told a piece of him. The nights alone in his room, the sound of his mother praying in the kitchen when she thought he was asleep, the way the rec center keyboard sparked sometimes but never stopped working. The room stilled. Even the faculty stopped whispering. Phones lowered, eyes lifted. And somewhere in the second half, the emotion behind his notes caught up to him. His chest clenched, his eyes stung, but his hands didn't falter. He played all the way through. And the last note faded. He lifted his hands slowly, like releasing something heavy. Silence, then a single clap, then another, then the whole room. A standing ovation. Didn't happen. This wasn't a movie. But the applause was real. Full. Some students stood. One teacher wiped her eye. Even the announcer looked surprised. Noah stood, bowed without thinking, then walked off stage fast, before the crowd could catch him. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, breathing hard. A Crestview teacher, Mr. Wallace, approached, his voice cold, impressive. "But don't get cocky, kid. This stage isn't your home." Noah's eyes flashed. "Didn't need it to be. I brought my own." Mr. Wallace's face tightened, but he walked away. Landon's friend, Jake, slipped through the crowd, his voice a low growl. "You think you won. We'll make sure you don't come back." Noah stood tall, unshaken. "Try me," he shot back, his voice steady. Then a voice that was incredible. He turned. Landon. His blazer was buttoned now, hair a little neater, but the cockiness was gone. He wasn't flanked by friends this time. "I didn't know you could do all that," he said. Noah said nothing. Landon shifted, his voice dropping. "My dad, he's always pushing me to be the best, to own rooms like this. I saw you up there, and I don't know, man, you made it look easy." Noah studied him, seeing a crack in Landon's armor. "It ain't easy. Noah said quietly. You just gotta mean it. Landon nodded once. What I said earlier, I was out of line. Still, Noah didn't speak. I guess I just didn't expect it. Noah looked at him, then said, You didn't have to. Landon nodded again. Yeah. And that was it. No big moment, no handshake. Just an awkward pause and two boys standing in a hallway too big for either of them. Sloan came out, smiling. You did it. He managed a breathless laugh. I think I did. Vanessa rushed up, her eyes wide with pride but edged with fear. Noah, you were amazing! But stirring up those rich folks? It's dangerous, baby. Noah hugged her, his voice steady. I had to, Mama. For us. She looked at him for a long second. Let's talk later. There's someone I want you to meet. But what Noah didn't know was that someone in the crowd had already made a call, one that would open a door he never imagined he could walk through. By the time the bus pulled back into the parking lot of Frederick Douglass Middle, the sky was streaked with gold. Noah sat near the back, forehead resting against the window, watching Mobile roll by in pieces. Fast food signs, gas stations, corner stores, familiar again, comfortable, but smaller now. He hadn't said much on the ride. Some classmates gave him high fives, a few asked how he learned to play like that. One boy, Kayshawn, even joked, Bro, you made rich kids clap. That's magic. Noah had smiled, but inside everything still buzzed. Not nerves, not fear, something else he didn't have a word for yet. Miss Laurent waited at the bottom step as students climbed off the bus. Noah, she said, pulling him aside gently. That woman I introduced you to, Mrs. Hargrove, she wants to see you again. He blinked. Why? She runs a summer arts program, scholarship-based. She said it's rare to find someone like you who hasn't been formally trained. He looked down at his sneakers, the left one scuffed. I don't have money for lessons. That's the point, Ms. Laurent said. You wouldn't need any. Everything's covered. You just have to show up and play. Noah didn't know what to say. Opportunities like that didn't come to kids like him, not without strings. I told her I'd talk to your mom, she added. She'll want to know. That night at home, Vanessa stood in the kitchen, holding the brochure in one hand and a half-burnt grilled cheese in the other. Her face didn't say much, but her silence was loud. They're not trying to use him for anything? She finally asked. No, ma'am, Miss Lauren said from the other side of the table. It's a real opportunity. They've done this for students across the state. Vanessa looked over the paper again. And he'd stay where? In dorms, supervised, Mobile Institute for the Arts. Just a few weeks. He'd be home by the end of early summer. Noah sat on the edge of the couch, backpack still on, fingers curled into the straps. His mother stared at him, not blinking. You want this? He met her eyes. I think I do. She sighed, deep, the kind of sigh she only made when her mind was traveling way ahead of her mouth. He's 12, she said quietly. Still a baby. I'll be careful, Noah said, voice just above a whisper. You better. She looked at Miss Laurent again. I'll think on it. That was more than enough for now. A week later, the letter came, a white envelope with blue trim, his name typed neatly in the center. Inside was the formal offer. Noah read it 3 times before handing it to his mom. She didn't say anything at first, just nodded, then handed it back without a word. He packed his things in a duffel bag that was too big for him. Miss Laurent drove him to the campus herself. On the way there, she told him about other kids who had gone through the program, some who had never even touched a real instrument before their first lesson, others who'd gone on to places like Juilliard and Berkeley. But none of them sounded like you, she said. And I mean that. The campus wasn't like Crestview. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't fancy, but it felt honest. The music building had paint chips on the windowsill and benches worn smooth from years of waiting students. He liked that. His first day, he played in front of 3 instructors. They didn't ask where he came from, they asked what key he felt most at home in. He said D minor. They nodded like they understood. But not everyone was welcoming. A rival student, Caleb, a prodigy with a polished demeanor, cornered Noah after a session. You think you're special because you got in on a scholarship? Caleb sneered. This place is for real musicians. Noah's heart raced, but he stood tall. Then let's see who plays louder, he shot back, his voice steady. The challenge hung in the air, pushing Noah to work harder. During a workshop, Caleb publicly challenged Noah to improvise against him in front of the instructors. Let's see if the street kid can keep up, he taunted. Noah's hands shook, but he played, his raw notes outshining Caleb's polished ones, earning a nod from the lead instructor. Afterward, Caleb shoved Noah in the hallway, fists raised. "You embarrass me," he spat. Noah dodged, his voice calm but firm. "You did that yourself." An instructor intervened, but the tension lingered, fueling Noah's drive. The next day, the program director, Ms. Reynolds, singled Noah out during a group session, her voice sharp. "Some of you think raw talent's enough. It's not. Prove you're more than a fluke, Carter." The room went silent, all eyes on Noah, his face burning with humiliation. By the end of the first week, he'd written 3 new pieces. By the end of the second, he was teaching a classmate how to move through changes with feel instead of math, even as Caleb watched, his eyes narrowing. One evening after dinner, his instructor sat beside him in the practice room. "You know what I told my husband after I heard you play?" she said. Noah shook his head. "That's what talent looks like when it's unafraid." But the program director, Ms. Reynolds, pulled Noah aside later, her tone skeptical. "You're gifted, Noah, but don't think this program's a free ride. Prove you belong, or you're out." Noah's jaw tightened. "I've been proving it my whole life," he replied, his eyes unwavering. But even with new keys in his hands and doors swinging open, Noah still had one more thing to do before any of it felt real. It was March when Noah walked back through the doors of Crestview Academy. This time, he didn't arrive on a school bus, no matching t-shirts, no field trip form in his backpack. He came alone, invited back by Mrs. Hargrove to perform at the annual spring recital. It was her idea, a surprise solo act from a student of the summer arts program, a way to show what raw talent could become with the right support. Noah had grown a little taller since the winter. His jeans fit better, his curls were neater, and his hands had developed a quiet confidence. He still didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. The night before the recital, Vanessa pulled him aside, her voice trembling. "Noah, I'm scared for you. Those people, they don't know us, don't know what we've been through. What if they take this from you?" Noah took her hand, his voice soft but firm. "They can't take what's mine, Mama. Not this." Her eyes softened and she nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. That morning, Marcus cornered him in the hallway, his voice bitter. "You leaving us behind for them fancy folks, huh? Bet you'll forget where you're from." Noah faced him, unwavering. "I'm doing this for us, Marcus, so we don't stay stuck." Marcus stormed off, but Noah felt the weight of his words. Hours before the recital, Noah stood backstage, facing a small group of Crestview students, whispering doubts. He stepped forward, voice steady. "Y'all think I don't belong? Watch this stage tonight. My music'll speak louder than your words." The group fell silent, stunned by his boldness. The auditorium looked just as he remembered it. Clean floors, bright lights. That stage didn't feel bigger than him anymore. In the front row sat Miss Laurent, her purse balanced on her lap, eyes shining with quiet pride. And next to her, Vanessa, wearing her best blouse and clutching the edge of her seat like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She hadn't been sure about the performance at first. "I don't know what people like that want from kids like you," she had said. Noah had answered simply, "Just to hear." Now here she was, waiting to hear. The MC gave a brief introduction. "Tonight's final performer is a young man who reminds us why music still matters. Please welcome Noah Carter." He walked out, not too fast, not too slow, just steady. The Steinway was there again, waiting. This time he didn't hesitate. The piece he played was new, something he'd written 2 weeks earlier, inspired by his early summer. It had no title, just movement. It started low, steady, like steps being counted, then climbed, measure by measure, into something warmer, more certain. There were flourishes, yes, but nothing showy. Everything had purpose. Notes flowed like thoughts forming mid-sentence, honest, true. Halfway through, he glanced up. Landon sat 3 rows back, arms folded, watching. They hadn't spoken since that hallway, but Noah didn't need words. The silence between them now wasn't heavy, it was filled with understanding. When the final note hung in the air, Noah held it just long enough for the breath in the room to catch. Then he lifted his hands, and this time the applause came fast. Not polite, not hesitant, real. Vanessa stood. She didn't clap at first, just stared at her son, like she couldn't believe he was hers. Then quietly, she smiled. After the show, people approached him. Teachers, parents, a few students. They asked about his music, where he learned, what came next. He answered as best he could, still uncomfortable with too much attention. But one moment stayed with him most. A small boy, maybe 9, skinny, with crooked glasses, walked up and whispered, "That made me want to try piano too." Noah knelt slightly. "You should." "I don't know how." "Doesn't matter. Just start." The boy smiled. That was enough. Later, as they drove home, Vanessa was quiet. "You okay?" Noah asked. She nodded. "I just never thought I'd see something like that, not with your name on it." He looked out the window. The streetlights blurred past. "Neither did I," he said, "but maybe it was always there." She didn't answer, but her hand reached across the console and rested on his. That night, Noah sat alone in his room, a worn notebook open on his lap. He didn't write music this time, just a single line scratched in bold. "No one hands you a stage, you claim it." He thought of the piano, its keys gleaming under Crestview's lights, and how he dared to touch them despite the taunts, the doubts, the world whispering he didn't belong. He pulled out a faded letter from his father, found tucked in the guitar case months ago. "Noah, your music is your fight," it read. "Never let them silence you." Tears stung his eyes, but they fueled his resolve. In that moment, he'd learned something raw and true. Talent doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't care about your address, your clothes, or the weight of your last name. It only asks that you answer when it calls. Noah had answered, not with words, but with every note he played, proving he was enough. As he closed the notebook, a knock came at the door. It was Landon, alone, his blazer gone, looking smaller. "I was wrong about you," he said, voice unsteady. "You deserved that stage." Noah nodded. No anger left. "So do you, man. Find your own." Landon smiled faintly, then left. A silent truce forged. So if you're reading this, wondering if you're worthy to chase your own dream, let Noah's story be your spark. You don't need an invitation to shine. Seize your moment, just as he did. What's your stage, and how will you claim it? Share your story below, and we'll continue the conversation at MaximumFun.org/juststart.